So if you have Googled a bit about JavaScript, then most commonly, a few times you must have seen this word called ES6 or ES 2015. So some people say that ES6 is what it is, a modern JavaScript, or why it is called ES, not JS. So we'll see just in a bit. What happens that ES6 full form is Ecmascript 6 or Ecmascript 2015. So it is also called ES 2015 or it is called ES6. So basically, it is the sixth version of JavaScript specification, and it was released in 2015, and that's why it is called ES 2015 or ES6. Now, it is actually the newer version of JavaScript which was introduced in 2015. So before that, I believe in 2009, 10, earlier the standard specification was ES5, and after that, for a long time, some major changes. Any major changes were not there, but in 2015 a few major changes to the JavaScript specification came, and those are very important because those are the ones which are very popular today and which we are using. So those things came in this build of this specification of JavaScript called ES6 in 2015. Now, why this is called ES6? Because actually the JavaScript standardization is taking place by an organization whose name is ECMA International, and they officially recognize a standardization of a script called Ecmascript, and JavaScript follows this specification. That's why JavaScript is sometimes also called Ecmascript, because it follows that specification. And the specification, to be precise, is called year wise. So ES 2015 and ES6, this is the sixth version, right? However, later 2015 onwards, they decided that we have to release every year one new specification, latest specification, right? So what has happened that after that, ES 2016, 17, 18, in this order, the all the different specifications every year, 18, 19, 20, 21, all these years, every year a new version of ES comes, which defines a new standard specification of JavaScript. Now, one small thing, ES 2015 is also called ES6. Actually, similarly, after that you just keep on incrementing this number. So ES 2016 is also called ES7. ES 2017 is also called ES8, in that manner. But initially, but most popular term is ES6 and 2015, and after that generally people use ES 16, 17, 18 just to represent the ES 2018, which means that it is 2018 version rather than saying ES9 or ES10. Okay, so just ES6 is it was a landmark event. That's why ES6 is very popular term. But otherwise, after that, every year a new version of ES comes. However, there is also a term called ES next. So rather than every time saying ES 2018, ES 2019, if you want to say that, I'm trying to refer to the latest and greatest version, most recent specification of JavaScript or Ecmascript, right? Then you say that, simply you say ES next, which means that, yeah, whatever is the latest version, right? Next version at the current time of the writing. That is the thing which you refer to by ES next. Now, what are the things and what are the various features which made this landmark shift, which came in 2015 in the form of ES6. ES6 brought so many new features that in fact today's JavaScript is completely non-recognizable from earlier JavaScript. Okay, so you'll be surprised that right now whatever things you were learning, most of that was ES6 only. So for example, you are always using let and const, right? You're not using var, right? And I told you that you should not use it. In fact, that var was ES5 specification, and before ES6 that let and const were not there, right? But now, these days, most of the ES6 features, and in fact ES7, 8 and further features also, as soon as they are standardized, very quickly they are implemented by the modern browsers, and readily most of the almost all the browsers today will have these features by default. And that's why we don't even bother to learn those earlier syntaxes. And even if some browsers don't support, there are ways which we'll see later where you'll write in the modern syntax and still you can use that code by changing that code automatically for targeting those browsers, right? So right now there is no point in learning those syntaxes which are completely outdated, right? So for example, let and const was added by ES6 in 2015. Arrow function, we saw two ways, right? One, function keyword, that was the ES5 and before. Arrow functions are were introduced in ES6. Template literals, so we saw something like this, right? So let some xyz is equal to in template literals, which means that in backticks we were saying that this hello world or something, right? So in backticks this thing is called template literal. And we saw that if we have some variable, let's say c is equal to 100, then we can embed those variables inside this thing, right? We saw these things. So if I print now xyz, then I will get that variable embedded inside. So these sort of features, this is called template literals, that was also introduced in CES6, which we already learned. Multi-line strings, we saw that in fact this string, this whole thing can be multi-line, it doesn't matter, right? This whole multi-line is supported, and you will see that when you run it, it is absolutely fine, right? Multi-line. So this multi-line string is also ES6 feature. Now all these things we have already learned. A few which we are going to learn just now. So default parameters, destructuring spread operator, and destructuring assignment, and these object literal enhanced notation. These in the just next set of videos we are going to learn these. But there are a few more which are important of them. Most important of them is promises and modules and finally classes. So these we will see in somewhat later, but right now let's get started with these things. Default parameters. So default parameters, when we were discussing functions, then we saw that okay, I can pass 2-3 arguments and I can pass like these things, right? But that time, if you remember, that we discussed that if you are having three parameters, and let's say equal to 0, this is the new syntax which we are talking about default parameters, right? If this syntax is not there, then if ABC is there, then when you are using this function, then you have to be aware that how many arguments you have to pass from here, because if they are expecting 3 and you are passing 2, then the third one would have been undefined, right, by default. Now default parameters, what it does, that if you don't pass that, then default parameter will automatically assign that value if you don't pass it. So for example, here it is asking 3 variables. If you have passed it, the third one, then c will be 20 only. But if you don't pass it here, then this c will be 0. This is the advantage of this thing. Okay, so let's try it out. So let's have the same function name. Let's have the same function name, add, and this adds, let's say, two or 3 numbers, right? Which means that if a plus b plus c, okay, which means that if I print something like let's say 1 2 3, then it will print 6. That is fine, it is printing 6. But you see that let's try to see the values of a, b and c. Obviously it will be 1 2 3 because these are passed. But if you see that, let's say I don't pass the third argument, right? Then what is happening, you see that this is nan, and nan is because 1 2 and then undefined. C I did not pass, and that's why it became undefined. And since it became undefined, 1 plus 2 3, and 3 plus undefined, anything plus undefined, any number plus undefined, then it gives me nan, and that's why this thing is happening. I don't want that. What I want is that if I pass 2 numbers, then it should add 2 numbers. If I pass 3 numbers, it should add 3 numbers, and then it should give me correct answer always. Okay, so if I do something like this, which is a syntax which was proposed here by default parameters, right, in ES6, then this the new syntax says that okay, if, for example, right now 1 to undefined was there, if I have done this thing, which means that if it is not passed, then it will be 0, not undefined. So if you see, then right now 1 2 instead of undefined, it is 0, and that's why 1 plus 2 plus 0, and then the correct answer 3 is returned, right? So if you pass 3, then correct 3 is added, and if you pass 2, then 2 are added. So this is a helpful syntax, right? Similarly, let's say instead of one two values, let's say you pass simply one value, let's say 5 you are passing, then what is happening? See, then again NA and we are getting, because the problem is that, let's remove this part, just call the second one, add 5. What is happening is that 5 is 5 passed, and the third one is like okay, 0, but again second one again has no default parameters, and that's why it is undefined. That's why we can use equal to 0 here, and then 500 correct answer. In fact, again if we do something like this, no, then again the problem will come, and it's an. So why to bother? If in this case we pass everything equal to 0, then it will work for even 0 arguments, it will work for 1 argument, it will work for 2 arguments, and it will of course work for 3 arguments, right? So in that sense, you can understand that you can, in this way you can use this feature called default parameters. However, let's say this feature is not there, then how will you handle this? And let's take the simple example of this thing. Let's take the simple example of this thing. Okay, let's take a simple example of that only C is equal to 0 was there and it was working fine, but I don't have this feature. So you understand that let's say you are in the world of ES5, okay, or something like that, right? This feature is not there. Then how you would have as a or let's say even if this feature is there, you are not aware of it. Then how will you implement it, right? So it's simple. What is happening here is that you can use something like this. We could achieve the same thing using something like this, where that we take C or 0. If we write this syntax, then what it will mean? It will mean that C is equal to C or 0, which means that if C is there, then it will not go above. But if C is truthy, obviously if C is falsy, then it will go to the next, which we earlier we analyzed a lot in terms of short circuiting, right? So when C is undefined, the undefined is falsy, it will move to the next one and it will get 0, and the whole thing will evaluate to 0, and that's why C will be 0, which you can see here that right now if you do it is C equal to 0. So instead of passing here this line you could have used, but again that C is equal to 0 will be a shortcut, right? And again if you want to do both variables, then you can do B is equal to 0 and B equal to 0, right? Just one thing that don't think that whenever I pass anything, then only it is going then only that thing is returning, otherwise only it is going to 0. That is not the case. In fact, if you pass something like 1 0 0, then you might be thinking that you have this 0 is one you have passed, but actually what has happened that C is 0 and it was 0, and in case of 0 0 is falsy, and that's why even if you passed 0, but actually it moved ahead and it gave this value, right? So if you want to prove that, then let's write 5 here, right? Then you will see that you are getting 1 to 5 even if you have passed 0. So it's not that this thing is that much safe like this. You understand? This is very much safe. If you do something like this, then in fact, let's say you pass 5 also, I don't care, right? Whatever you pass, but that value will not be taken. It will be taking 1 to 0 only, right? Because anything you pass, then only then it is taking that only. If you don't pass, then only this default thing is taking, right? So which means that earlier syntax which we wrote, we have to write it more we could achieve the same thing, right? So we have to write it actually that if C is triple equal to undefined, if exactly C is triple equal to undefined, then only assign it to 0, otherwise use C. So if you write that slightly complicated logic, then it would work exactly like this. But this is like, now we have understood the easiest way to achieve this in ES6, and that is what we are going to use, and we can always use that, is default parameters. Next, destructuring and spread operator. Now, destructuring is a concept where we take, let's say, destructuring works for actually arrays and objects both. But right now we are going to understand on first for arrays, and then we will discuss it for objects. So let's say there is an array 1 2 3, another array 4 5 6. You want to combine this. Earlier we saw some function like array.concat or those things, right? But that was the older way. In a new way, you can achieve that easily using something called spread operator. This triple dot thing is called spread operator. What does this do? What does this do? It takes, you can understand that whatever the contents, so 1 2 3 bracket, right, this thing is there, it just takes the contents, and you can understand that it spreads it here, it like pastes it here. Similarly, it takes the contents 4 5 6 and pastes it here, so you get the whole thing, right? So we will understand slowly by a couple of examples. But let's say 1 2 is there, and you have another 3 4 is there. Then if you do something like triple dot arr1 and triple dot arr2, and you print that, then basically you are getting 1 2 3 4. So you understand what has happened. You can understand it something like this, that I did something like this, that let arr is equal to, and I spread operator A will take the contents of arr1, spread operator arr1 will take the contents of arr1 and it will paste that, followed by it will again take the contents of this and paste it. Okay, and that's why this new thing is created, and you can say that when I print error, something like this happens. You can try it like something like this, that let's say I don't spread both. Then you will see that now it is an array of arrays. You understand? So you see that this thing is an array of arrays. You understand? So this thing is an array of arrays. Okay, so we discussed that we can have an array of arrays, array of objects. Inside objects we can have key values as arrays, so everything is possible, right? So in this case, this is an array with two elements where both the elements are again arrays. Okay, so this is the example. However, now let's say you just spread the second one, right? Then you see that it is not array of arrays. It is now, the first one is array, but the second one is like this thing is removed from that content from the second array, and the contents are put here, right? Similarly, if I would have had this, then you can clearly see that it is 1 2 and then this part is array. So you can now clearly understand that what this spread operator is doing. Spread operator is doing taking the contents and spreading it inside this thing. More importantly, if you are spreading the array, then here also you have to use the array notation. You understand? Here also you have to use array. And let me tell you one more thing. You can write any more thing. So let's say again here you can write like, let's say 5 8 whatever, and then that thing will come here. You see? So 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 from the spreading part, and then 5 8 whatever you wrote, that is come. In fact, you can write anything. You can write 7 here, you can write like 19 23 here, and then everything will work fine. You see, 19 23, and then 1 2 came from the spreading, and then 7 came, and then spreading from the second array 3 4 came, and then 5 8 came, right? So everything will work as fine. So you can understand that this is, again, if you see this thing looks like an array declaration only, right? It's just that instead of elements, at some places you can use this spread operator, and when you use spread operator, then instead of one element, all the elements in that array are sort of copy pasted there, right? So that is how spread operator works. Next, let's see and this process is called destructuring. Okay. Now again, let's try to use spread operator and try to do destructuring of objects this time rather than simply arrays. So the idea is that here also same thing will happen. If you have an object obj1 and let's say you have some key value pairs, you have obj2 and some key value pairs. If you now spread, then the new object will have all the keys, all the key value pairs in both the objects combined. Okay, so let's say this is obj1 and this is I'm just taking a simple example, but like you can have strings or anything. First one key value can be string, another key value can be boolean or anything. But for example, right now I will take just simple example. Let's say AB and let's say CD. Understand? Something like this. And this is obj1, this is obj2, and then I create. You could have used const also because I'm not modifying anything. But anyways, obj is equal to, and see, that's why I told you earlier we were using bracket notation because we were spreading big brackets we were using because we were spreading arrays. Right now we are spreading, we are sort of destructuring using the spread operator this objects rather than arrays, and that's why we have to use this notation, this curly braces, which is for objects. And here we can use a spread operator, and then we can use obj1, right? And then again we can use spread operator and obj2. Okay, so now if you see that if you print obj, then you will get like A, B, C, D, all the things. So you see this is equivalent to, again you might have understood, but let me clarify if this is the first time, that it is equivalent to that I just copied it, pasted it, right? And again whatever, again this thing has to be spread, so I have copied it, right? And I have pasted the contents, the inner contents are copied and pasted. So if you see that when I print obj, it is A, B, C, D, 5, 10, 5, 10, right? And if I do like 25 and 30, then the same thing will happen. Understand? So now you can understand that how these things are working. One small thing is there, that if the values are let's say common, so here we saw that A, B, C, D all are different, but let's say A, B, C, B I am using, right? So when I copy this, then you can, so in one object only one key can be there, right? So B cannot be there at one time, so you cannot have let's try that first. What do you think? obj1 will be there. What do you think? obj1 will be there if I do something like again B30 or B50 or B40. What do you think? So you see that even if I have key 3, I sort of write 3 times A, B, B, but actually unique keys can only exist. And that's why when you run this, you see that A5 and B40, A5 and B40, it takes the latest one. It takes the latest one, means the most recent one. So B10 you did, and then B40 you did, whatever the latest you did, that will B40, that will exist, persist, right? Again, if you do something like this, then you move B40 towards left, let's say you move it here, then now A5 B10 will be there, right? Because A5 B40 and then B10 over written that, right? So now in the same context, if you see through that lens here, then what should you expect? See, obj1 I'm spreading, obj2 I'm spreading, and this B is like sort of common. Then you can guess that A, B, C, and then what will happen, that this B will override the earlier B. So as expected, the answer is this: A is 5, that is fine, but B is not 10, B is 30, because B is now taking this value, because this is the latest one, because you put it later, right? And then C is 25, C is 25. But if you do something like obj2, you spread obj2 first, and then you spread obj1, then you see the value is A is 5, A is 5, A is 5, B is 10 now. You see, B is 10 and C is 25. So actually what happened, that C25, B25, it started with C25, B25, but that B25 overwritten by this B10 in the second spread, and second spread A is 5, but that B25 C25 B30, yeah, so C25 B30, that 30 is now overwritten by this 10, and that's why B is 10 and then A is 5. You understand? So this is how. So the order in which you are spreading very much matters, right? Okay, so this thing should be fine. This should be fine. This video is getting long, so we have to discuss a related thing called destructuring assignment. We will discuss that in the next section.